Hello. Can you guys, I hope you guys can hear me now. We had some technical difficulties, but now we have a brand new laptop, different mic, and hopefully this is a lot clearer. So you guys can hear me now, right? Okay, so where was I? So thank you, FutureLab, for having me. Today, I will be giving a general overview in terms of the management consulting application process. So I will go from CV, cover letter prep, interview prep, and also the actual interview process itself. So in preparing for this session, I came up with a framework because that's what consultants like to do. I came up with a framework in terms of how you can go about thinking about the application process. So now I will firstly just quickly run through what I will talk about in each of the sections. So the framework that I came up with is science, sales, and also sentiment. So by science, I mean the general formula that you can get from Googling online. By sales, I mean how you should sell yourself. And finally, sentiment refers to the softer side of things in terms of your assessment of your fit with the company that you're applying for. So I would also urge you guys to think about the application process. I mean, when we think about it as science, sales, and sentiment, I also see it as a two-step forward, one-step backward process. And I will elaborate a bit more about what I mean in detail. So first things first, you have either just graduated or you are thinking about a career switch into management consulting. So what do you need to do first? You need to update your CV or create a CV in some cases, and also create a cover letter. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail or drill down into exactly what the perfect CV or what the perfect cover letter should be like, because number one, you can Google it. And number two, I don't think there is a hard and fast answer. So from Google, you will be able to get all sorts of templates and all sorts of examples of how you should go about creating a very clear, clean cover letter and CV. But what I would like to share is that there really isn't, while you can follow the templates, there isn't a one size fits all. So take me for example, I came from academia. So in academia, what is the one way we quickly assess a person's CV? It's by sheer number of pages, because the more pages you have simply reflects the more conferences you have been to and the more publications you have, and that's what all lecturers, professors, researchers want to achieve. University pedigree almost doesn't matter, because first class honors, that's a given. Having a doctorate, that's a given. So nobody even looks at that section. It's more about the breadth of how well disseminated your hypothesis is. Now, coming into consulting, when I started, going through the motion of Googling what is a good cover letter or CV format for management consulting, I was shocked to see then that the advice generally given is keep it to one page. Highlight your education background, highlight your academic achievement. So that's the switch that I had to really think about in terms of exactly which qualities I want to highlight most in my CV, especially given that it's just the one page. So I think that is so I think that's mainly the science part of it, right? There's a general template, and you basically fill it up with experiences that you think are most relevant to call out. And also you have to do the necessary homework to find out what your potential company looks for, at least on paper. And I would also advise that the same way that I did it during my application process, don't have one standard cover letter and one standard CV for all the applications that you're making. Where possible, do tailor it. Because bear in mind, the other person on the other side reading it has seen a lot of these CVs, and they know when it's just a copy paste and it's not, and it's just a generic CV. And I think they do appreciate when you have taken the time to understand their company properly and to understand what values that matters to them, and then call that out. So that's the stuff you can do, right? That's a checklist almost. You have to go through it. You have to do your homework. Make sure you checklist off all the hygiene factors. It needs to be clean. It needs to be clear, etc. Okay, now that gets you an interview slot. So I think as far as the application process goes, the interview is the most scary part, right? Because it is now no longer offline. You can no longer do it in your own time. It's live, it's face-to-face, and you have to think on your feet. So in management consulting, I think the general format for the interviews there's 3 parts to it. Number 1, personal experience. Number 2, the case study. And number 3, the others. So the any other question section. So I see the interview process as the second part of my framework, which is the sales part. So the entire interview process is basically an opportunity for you to sell yourself, sell why you are a good fit and why the firm should hire you. So I think now I will focus a bit more in terms of the case study, because I think that to a lot of people would be the most daunting aspect of the interview, myself included. So for case study preparation, I think it's number 1, again, do the necessary homework, right? Google, there's tons of resources available out there in terms of what are the do's and don'ts of case studies. And generally, you will find that the advice given is practice, 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 right? Always find a buddy. And we always sound a lot more prepared in our heads than we are when we actually have to verbally say it out loud. So there are tons of example case studies. Say, for example, what is the new go-to-market strategy for company A who wants to sell product B in country Y, for example. So get someone to ask you those questions and go through the motion, get comfortable with going through the motion of dealing with very little information and having to come up with an answer very quickly. And I think for preparation for a case study, also understand the reason why management consulting firms do it. It's not to scare you, it's not to watch you fail, but it's rather to see you in action. So it's really to see how you process information on the spot, it's to see how you can problem solve, and it's also to see how you can deal with new surprise information that comes up in the middle of the case. So the standard format would be your interviewer will ask you a case, and you would then have to come up with an answer within the next 5-10 minutes, and then go through the process of it. So I find very helpful to always come up with a structure. So take your time, understand the question, and don't be afraid to ask probing questions to make sure that you understand it. So again, it's not about showing that you know the industry or that you know the right answer, because there isn't a right answer, and the problem statement itself may not be very clear. So feel free to ask enough questions so that you have a good grasp of what they are asking, and then think about how you can structure it and solve it in a structured manner. So having an issue tree, for example, is something that you will also see a lot when you Google for how to solve a case study. Going through an issue tree helps you make sure you cover all the necessary aspects of it. So there are tons of frameworks available online, but do not be, you may be inclined to, because of the practice that you have done, feel that you want to force fit a particular framework into an answer. That is not always the best solution. So again, I think that goes back to my earlier point about do ask questions, because again, it's the person that's interviewing you could very well potentially be your next boss. So they are not looking at you for answers, because the answers that they have are based on their 10, 20 years of experience. So they will always have a better answer than you. But what they want to see is the way that you think through a problem and whether or not they can see you as a team member. So ask questions. And number two, what if comes a case where you get a case study that you have no idea about? Now, even for me, even until now, if I were to do case study interviews, and I do get a question in a domain that I'm completely unfamiliar about, I panic. So I know that this is an advice that's a lot easier said than done, but keep your cool. And again, remember that this is just a conversation with someone who will potentially be your boss. And so it is okay to admit, I am not familiar with that industry. I am not familiar with that domain area. But then here are the things that I do know. And here is some of the assumptions that I want to make to link those two things together. They may not be the most natural link, but these are the assumptions that I'm going to make to proceed on with the case. So take, for example, if you were given a case about a premium organic grocery store that wants to enter the Malaysian market. What should you advise this company in terms of how they should enter Malaysia? And at this point, you panic because you know absolutely nothing about groceries. You know nothing about the competitors in this market in Malaysia. So how do you go about answering that question, right? Because typically a very standard go-to-market strategy would then ask you to first, think about do your competitive analysis. You have to see, okay, this is the market share for grocery stores in Malaysia. These are the few key players, and this is, the niche area that your company wants to serve in. Therefore, what is the potential market size, and then what is the addressable market size for that? But you know none of that, and that's okay. But what you do know is the mobile payments in Malaysia. You know a lot about that demographic. So an interview is also a time when you can sort of negotiate with your interviewer to say, okay, I don't know a lot about that, but I do know a lot about this area. I know a lot about mobile payments. So can I then pivot this slightly to talk a bit more about mobile payments? Say, assume that the company is already in Malaysia. How can they increase their reach? What is the best way to make sure that they get more customers coming back? So, and assuming the customer has, the company has already decided to go on a digital strategy, what would their digital strategy be? To invest in a mobile payment system, because that's the way that you attract more customers, for example, and then you shift it that way. And in my experience of doing case studies, that no interviewer would be extremely opposed to that idea, because again, they just want to see the way that you solve the case, the way that you problem solve, not the case specifically. So I see some questions here, so I will firstly address some of them because I think they're related to this point. So the first question is how to ace the job application even if I don't have much relevant experience and skills. So I think that's a very valid question. And I think that was also something that I asked myself before I joined consulting, because I have no business background. I am a psychology grad with a focus in neuroscience and brain sciences, which is not financial, whereas finance skills is very valued, or it's an assumed prerequisite for consulting. So in that case, I think it's, especially in today's climate, I don't think there is a fixed answer, because then there wouldn't be any companies that are struggling, right? Because if a business only requires a certain type of people, then if those certain type of people gets into the business, then the business should run very smoothly. So I think a lot of companies these days, they want to hire high potential people. And I think that links back to why there's always a case study portion of the interview process. And that is because they are seeing your ability to solve problems on the go, even without having prior knowledge to it. So again, it's about selling yourself. It's about drawing relationships between the kinds of experiences that you have with the role that you will be performing. And therefore, the first part of it, really understanding the company that you're applying for, not just sending out a CV, not just doing like a mass blast of your CV to all different companies is very important, and also tailoring it to fit the company. So even if, you know, you had high school experiences of, you know, running the sports club, that shows leadership experience, and that is valued, right? Or teamwork, for example. You will find that in consulting, you are almost never working alone, and the value of the quality of your solution always depends on your team having people with diverse backgrounds, because then you cover all grounds and come up with the most holistic solution. So therefore, I think all experiences and all skills are relevant, but you just need to sell it accordingly and know what role you will be performing. So the next question is then, what website or apps is useful to a management consultant? So this is also a very good question. And I think, I'm not sure if this is about useful to a management consultant, an aspiring management consultant, or is it a management consultant that is already in the job? But I think in general, if you're talking about an aspiring management consulting, someone who wants to get into the field, then there are places like, so Victor Chang is a very good source. He has a set of videos. He actually has a book as well, and he has a blog where he talks about what are the do's and don'ts, how to get into the job, and also he talks a bit about how do you do the job well once you're in. So Victor Chang is a good source. There are other places like, I think, managementconsultant.com or managementconsulting.com. But don't just Google it. There are tons and tons of resources available out there. And you will actually find that you get a lot of repeated advice. So I think it is always best to reach out to someone who's actually doing the job day in, day out to find out what it's all about. Like on FutureLab, I think it's good because the kinds of stuff that say the case study, right? It's to assess your problem solving. But when you actually get into the job, that's not what you really do. You don't, you are not given a simple case in 5 sentences, and you're not given just a simple 10 minutes to solve it. It's not the reality. So do speak to people to prepare yourself better. And also, most importantly, to understand the culture of the firm that you are applying for. The next question here then is case study also part of the internship interview? I think it differs from firm to firm, but so I'm from Accenture, and in Accenture, I believe it is part of the internship interview as well. And I think I should really stress that the case study is just a means of assessing your problem-solving skills and how comfortable you are with numbers. And it's just a methodology. It's just like MCQ and, answering essays. Case study is also just a method to assess your problem-solving skills. So it's really not as daunting as how it sounds. And if you treat it as just a conversation, you treat it as a sales process, sales in terms of you selling yourself, in terms of what is your unique perspective of how you solve problems, then that's fine. So it's thinking out loud, but thinking in a structured manner. So if I give you an example, when I say that a case study is your time to sell yourself, a recent case study that I did, I actually had an argument with my interviewer because I didn't like the approach that he was asking me to follow to solve the case. So it's a very simple case. I was asked, how many chicken rice shops are there in KL? And, my answer to that was, so again, structure, right? So I went with, okay, firstly, where are the places that sells chicken rice? It's your hawker stores, it's your shopping malls, and it's your standalone shops, for example. And then I went with, how many chicken rice stores will there be inside each of it? So at this point, my interviewer said, I don't like your approach. I don't like you to go by the the supply side. I want you to solve this case from a demand point of view. So he wanted me to solve it in terms of how many people would want to buy chicken rice. So I didn't really agree with that way of solving it because I feel that there were so many more steps before I could get to my answer. And then my interviewer says, nope, but the client, which is me, just prefers to solve it from a demand point of view. So we went on like a short argument, and in the end, I gave an answer for both. So I guess it's not. So again, there's no right answer. It's just a conversation, and as long as you can walk through your thought process, it makes sense. That's that. That is you telling your future boss, this is how I will go by doing my work. So and also to add a bit more into that particular experience, I told the interviewer, I am solving it from a supply point of view, because if this were to be an actual project and we are given, say, 8 weeks to solve it, gathering the data to validate and to triangulate whether or not from a supply side, how many chicken rice stores there should be, would take far too long. Therefore, I want to focus on going from a demand side, because those information are already available. How many shopping malls, how many individual stores, etc. So that is a lot easier. So don't be afraid to do that. Again, the interviewer is not out there to make you look silly. It's not out there for you to solve their problems at work. It's just out there to see, can I work with this team member on a future project? So then the next question is, what is the application process if I want to apply for a university industrial training at Accenture? So I am not exactly, I can't, on top of my mind, can't think of what is the actual recruitment process within Accenture, but I believe that this information are all online, are all available online. So do log on to the website, and we have a general line for the KL office where you can email and ask for what are the steps required. But as a first key step, prepare your CV. And look at what is going to be required for the role that you're applying for, and submit your CV to HR. So next question here is, how do you justify the switch in career to the hiring manager? So yes, this is a very common question, especially if you are doing a switch and you're not a fresh grad, right? So, and before panicking about what your answer should be, or before preparing the perfect answer when you do your homework before an interview, I find it very helpful to always take a step back and think about, why are people asking me this question? So not just, I go online and Google top 10 most common questions and then prepare an answer for each. Because that might not be enough, because the questions don't always come in that shape and form, even if they mean the same thing. So always ask yourself, why are people asking me, why do I want to switch? I just want to, right? I think I'm good, I'm here, and I want the job. Why do I have to explain the switch? And the reason why hiring managers always ask you, why do you want to switch, is because they want to know that this is not it's not an impulsive decision. They want to make sure you have thought through the pros and the cons of both jobs, and you won't regret it, right? Because say they like you, say they invest time in training you, the last thing that they want is for you to leave. So now, bearing that in mind, knowing why the hiring manager asks you that allows you then to prepare an answer that is, can I say, more satisfactory, and an answer that is more true, right? Rather than just saying, oh, okay, this is a standard question. These are how people have advised to answer it. Therefore, this is what I should do to answer it. So if I take myself, for example, when I applied, because I was moving back from London to KL, the standard question is, oh, but it's so much, there's a lot of opportunities in London. It's a very competitive environment. You will learn a lot. The markets are faster, etc., etc. Why do you want to come back to Malaysia? And if I can be very honest, my answer was just because I wanted to be closer to my family. Could I have come up with, a more an answer like, because I wanted to join your firm, because I knew that you guys were doing this particular project and therefore I really wanted in on it, I could, right? And would that be an advice that some people would propose online? Yes, but then that's not the case, right? So as I said, why do they ask you why the switch? They ask you why the switch because they want to know that it's not impulsive. And for me, it's not impulsive because I had made a decision that I wanted to be home. So, and that's that, right? I want to grow roots in Malaysia, and so my decision is final. Another question here is if I can give an example on how you consult a real existing customer and they achieve success by using your advice, if my company allows me to say. Let's see. I shall address that question shortly. So where was I? So now if I move back slightly into the sales part of it, so the actual interview process. So as I mentioned, I can see how case studies are daunting, and especially, I mean, there are two main types of case studies. One is the fixed archetypes, growth strategy, how to reduce costs, how to enter a new market, etc. And then there's also the back of the envelope questions. And this is the one that, I mean, personally for me, it tends to throw me off, right? Like how many ping pong balls can fit into a 747? And if you ask someone like me that question, I have no sense of space. I have no idea how big the plane is. I can only use my palm to describe how big a ping pong ball is. How am I supposed to count that? So again, don't panic. Know that they are just trying to see your thought process. So break it down, right? Every problem is a lot easier solved once you break it down to manageable chunks. So I'm someone who likes to come up with bullet points. Everything I do, I'd be like, okay, this is the 3 main buckets, like how I prepared for today. 3 main buckets. Science, sales, sentiment. Okay, now what is the drop down from that? And then what is the drop down for that? And then go through it, checklist one by one. So that's the one type. And then the other type of case studies, right? Like the example that I gave, if they were to ask you about the grocery industry and you know nothing about it, again, don't panic. Break it down to manageable chunks. I was asked another case study recently, which I really, really struggled with. How many LRT is there in Malaysia? I don't take the public transport a lot because I sometimes get confused and then I sometimes miss the train and then I just don't take it a lot. I don't even drive a lot because I'm not a very good driver. So this is the last question that you should ask me. And I also don't know my way around KL very well. So when I was asked this, I was stunned for the longest time. And I told my interviewer I need a couple of minutes to think about it. So don't be afraid to ask for that. I have never met an interviewer who said, no, you cannot, you need to answer it right this second. Because again, they are not out there to kill you. They just want to see your thought process. So I took a couple of minutes and I focused on what I did know, right? So, and then I tried to think about it from a real life perspective, day to day, who needs to get on the LRT? So then I went from population to the number of people who would then need to go to work. So then I went with, okay, who needs to take the LRT? So it's so and so and so, and then I broke down the solution, and in the end, it went pretty well. Because then that is also you giving your unique perspective, and as part of the interview process, there's always this part where they ask you, oh, any other questions for us? So for this particular interview, because I struggled so much with the LRT question, I actually just asked my interviewer, so this was how I solved it. I went from a supply side, from a demand side of it. How would you have solved it? And the interviewer then actually explained, oh, so if it were me, I would have went with, the number of lines we have in KL. And then for each line, what are the times that it runs? And therefore, how many LRTs would I then need to have? So that is a unique perspective. So think of the interviewer as also the interview process as your chance to get to know the people who are working in the firm a bit better. and also to get to know how the culture is like. And I think that leads me to my final part, or my final section, which is the sentiment aspect of it. And I would also like to think of sentiment as, so now we have talked about our 2 steps forward, right? So 1 step is, do your hygiene, make sure you get your hygiene factor right, do your necessary homework, write up a good CV, write up a good cover letter, submit it in, and once you get the interview, prepare for it, do the necessary practices, read the materials available online, and then now what next, right? So you have done step 1, step 2. I think in terms for you to succeed in the job, it is very important for you to take 1 step back and to consider whether or not you are a good fit for that firm, and whether or not you will blend in with the firm's culture. Because I think, especially when it comes to making a career switch, you have to already at the interview process be able to imagine working for that particular company. And there is tons of people who would say that when you do something that you're passionate about, that's when you truly fulfill your potential. And I think that there is a lot of truth in that. So don't underestimate the importance of considering the more sentimental side to the application process. So I think that leads me to then this question that I had earlier in terms of an example of the kind of advice that we have given and whether or not the company achieves success from following that advice. And this is a very good question for multiple reasons. One of it being that some people may not always like the management consulting role, because depending on the nature of the project that you are on, sometimes your engagement with a particular client just ends at you delivering a PowerPoint presentation that then gets printed and then stored into a cupboard somewhere until it's needed. It is not always the case that, I make this recommendation and tomorrow it's being implemented. I think that is something that's more applicable in startups, and also startups don't hire consultants to give them this advice because they need it immediately. And with a consulting piece of work, it's typically a problem that may not be immediately there. It's to prepare for the future. It's about a company future-proofing themselves, or it's about a strategy that they want to take in the next 6 months or the next year. So because of that, you may not always, if you're someone who needs to get the instant gratification from knowing that what you have done, you immediately test it so that you can then refine your recommendation, then consulting may not always give you that. But I have been lucky enough to been on some projects where my recommendations are actually being executed. And my first project would be an example of that, to the point that actually my hiring manager and my first project manager, so he hired me in for this particular project. He interviewed me, hired me in, and he was my first PM. He's now actually on the client side, then delivering our recommendations. And it was basically a piece of work on the operating model. So so it's a company that grew by acquiring a bunch of other companies globally, and as a result, all the different companies didn't have a standard way of operating. So we came in and say that, okay, your HQ is based in KL. This is how all the separate companies. This is the operating model that all the separate companies should follow. And then this is what is currently being executed. So now I think it's on phase 4 of the project. And when we went in, it was in phase 1. So I think that is the kind of general advice that I have. There's a lot of material available. There is a standard formula that everyone says that you should follow, and these are proven steps that you should follow, right? Practice your numbers, read through necessary materials, have some general knowledge about the industries that you are passionate about. Tailor your CV, tailor your cover letter, so that it puts you in the best light, and the best light fit with the company that you're applying for. And for me, I think then it's the aspect of then really during the interview process, also not just see it as an opportunity for you to impress the interviewer, but also see it as an opportunity for you to get a sense of whether or not that firm is fit for you. So even for me now, I have been in consulting for close to 4 years now, 3 years and a bit. And I mean, the general advice for everyone is always know your worth, right? So it's not that because I'm in this job, I'm not allowed to go for other interviews. I'm not allowed to assess the market. I'm not allowed to see what other opportunities are out there. Seeing what other opportunities that there is out there is not a sign of you not being loyal to your firm. It's just a sign of you knowing what you are worth and knowing what you are passionate about and knowing what helps you wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning because you want to solve a particular problem. So I do, every now and then see what's out there in the market. And for me, when I do those interviews, when I speak to those interviewers, it's always about the final aspect for me, the sentiment part of it. Can I see myself coming to work in this place every day? Can I see myself reporting to this person that I'm interviewing with? And that for me is the most critical factor when I decide in terms of any switch. So any further questions for me? Oh wait, I think I do see it here. Sorry, I did not scroll down. Let's see. Uh, so what are the good questions to ask at the end of the interview? So good question. I sometimes struggle with this, and I struggled with this a lot actually when I first started interviewing. So my first job coming out from academia, because I'm like, oh, that's my opportunity to prove myself. That's my opportunity in case everything else goes bad. I need to show that I can think of good questions. But then what did I do in order to prep for that? I literally Googled what are the good questions to ask at the end of the interview. And then you will come up with a whole bunch of examples. But the thing is, your interviewer has been in the job for many, many years now, and they can smell it from a mile away if you're simply asking a question for asking sake. Because then once they have answered the question, you're just going to stare blankly at them. Oh dear, they have answered the question, now I don't know what next. So that's exactly what I did, right? I Googled that, and then I have, okay, I have 3 questions that I want to ask at the end of the interview. But then when we actually got to that, after my interviewer answered the first question, there was no link, because I'm not genuinely curious about the questions that I asked. I didn't follow up on their answer. And then I just jumped straight to the second answer that I had prepared at the back of my mind. But that wasn't what I really wanted to know. And the interviewer could sense that. So I think your questions, what is a good question is something that, again, helps the interviewer see that they can have you on the team. So one good way is then to already imagine that you are reporting for that person. So I think this is where it's not everyone goes into the interview feeling like super confident, right? And sometimes you just need to almost fake it till you make it. And just imagine that you are part of the team. So this was a transition that I've made after my X number of interviews. So of course I need to, I mean, there's no shame to this, I think. I mean, I didn't pass every single interview that I've been for. But one switch that I made is then I just said, even during my case study, so to resolve this, we will do this. So I use words like we, because then I already imagine myself as part of the team. I went from saying, oh, I would suggest that the team should do this and that. No, I said, I will do this, we will do this. So I'm already, so then it also helps the interviewer imagine, okay, can I see this person as part of we? So good questions would then be, asking the interviewer in their experience, what are the more challenging moments that they had, or maybe like what's the most difficult client that they had, for example. But of course, this one you have to assess the tone of the interview and the personality of your interviewer. But for me, I have asked those questions, and I find that we had a very engaging conversation after, because then I asked my interviewer, so what is the most difficult client that they had? And then after my interviewer explained, then I asked why. And then I said, oh, okay, in that case, actually, we could have done this, this, this. Then maybe that would have resolved it. And then that actually got my interviewer thinking. So at the end of the day, you want your interviewer to walk out of the room thinking about some points that you have said, right? Thinking about you a bit more than just putting a check on the piece of paper that they have for evaluation. So, so that's that. Second question, how useful is your academia background in my current role? I think, so if I break down my academia background into two parts, so one is the subject matter, so it's psychology related. And then two is the process that I apply in academia. So, and that would be the hypothesis-driven, structured problem-solving process of it, because that's what research is about, right? You come up with a hypothesis, you do your literature review to find the necessary data points to back it up, you test it, you get your data, you analyze it, and then you present it back. That is exactly what consulting is, right? Your client gives you a problem, you come up with a hypothesis, you get the necessary data, you analyze it, you validate it, and then you go back with a recommendation. So from that perspective, it is extremely useful. But then on the other side, my subject matter was psychology. And that hasn't been, I mean, that's not immediately relevant, right? It's not an accounting background where I immediately need to analyze financial statements, and that's a match. But it is more and more useful. Psychology background, I find, is more and more useful in today's climate, especially as a lot of companies are thinking more and more about, say, design thinking. So how do you create the more user-centric experience, for example? And this is where I have a lot of knowledge in terms of, oh, people have this and this cognitive biases. People have this and need this kind of psychological needs that needs to be fulfilled. This is why people get addicted to games like Candy Crush, for example. So I think it has been useful. The process why has been useful from day one, and the psychology side I find more and more useful today. The next question, what careers can I move into if I am currently a management consultant and want to switch to another field? Oh, this is like a question that I can ask myself. So I mean, if you are currently a management consultant and want to switch into another field, I guess it's a question that, again, ask yourself why you want that, right? What is it that you want to change? What is it that you don't like about management consultancy, right? Is it the fact that because your recommendations are not immediately implemented, for example, then in that case, maybe you want to consider a startup, right? Because startups don't have time to think, they don't have time. They don't need to get buy-in from a million people. They just need to run with it. Trial and error, trial and error. So if you wanted a more agile way of working, then management consultancy may not give you that, then it's time to switch. So I guess it's careers you can move into. I mean, you can move into anything, right? I think management consultancy, for me at least, what do I gain the most? What have I gained from it? I think it's really problem solving. So if you're a good problem solver, then which careers can you move into? You can move into anything. You can even move into opening a cafe, because then now you know how to project manage. You know how to make sure you get your logistics right. You know how to make sure you get your fresh food into, demand and supply planning. So I think the world is really your oyster. I would highly recommend people to get into management consultancy for a few years at least, because I think that gives you the grounding. I think it gives you the rigor in terms of your thinking and in terms of your problem solving. And then moving on from there, I think this is also related to the earlier question of, what do I think helped me moving from academia to consulting. It's again the process in which you go by solving problems. Yeah, so it's any career. You just need to know why you want to make the switch. And yeah. So let's see. Accenture is hiring for strategy energy consultant right now. Do you mind to disclose the recruitment status right now? So yes, we are hiring. And I would say that in Accenture, we hire for potential. And if there are good candidates, our door will always be open to good candidates. So we don't have a recruitment status like, we are hiring for fresh grads. Therefore, you can only have this 1 month and then it kind of closes after that. And especially, as you mentioned, strategy energy consultant. So I'm not sure if you're referring to the level consultant or if you're referring to just consultants in general. But yeah, if you're talking about consultant as a level, we do hire people with some experience. And therefore, again, there's no fixed time. Always looking out for good potential. So if you think that you are fit, you are interested, you have done the necessary homework, then do send across your CV. And yeah. So let's see. What is the best and worst aspects of being a management consultant? Best aspect. So I start with best first. Best aspect of being a management consultant is, so as I mentioned, I would highly recommend it to people coming out from uni to at least have a couple of years of experience. Because not everyone is blessed in the sense that once they come out from uni, they know exactly what they want to do. Many people, I mean, we are interested in so many different things nowadays, right? And I read this very good article recently that had a sentence that really resonated with me, which was, the wealth of information makes poverty of attention. So it's basically saying that because now everything is at our fingertips, right? So all of a sudden, from only knowing 3 types of career path, we know 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. There is just too many options. So when there's too many options, where do we land ourselves at, right? We land ourselves at not knowing exactly what is the career choice for us. So I think being a management consultant allows you to, I mean, firstly, it's a stable job. And then secondly, because of the project nature of it, you are able to jump from one industry to another industry and from one domain to another domain. Of course, that is not always the case. And do bear in mind that no firm will ever hire you to train you. No one's going to pay to train you. So it's not, I mean, some people get the impression that, oh yeah, if I join management consultancy, myself included, you can jump industry every single project. That's not always the case. Oftentimes you do find that you have to specialize in a particular area at some point, because you do have to, especially as you go from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, you do need to be known for something. So it wouldn't always be the case, but the options are there. So that's, I think, one of the best parts of it. The worst part of it is then the flip side of that. So you may end up, after 2 years of being a management consultant, still be a generalist, especially if you're entering at a fresh grad level. You will get thrown into projects and you may have to do similar types of work, say project management, across different industries without knowing the industry fully. So you might kind of just end up taking away some methodologies, but then not actually taking away core domain knowledge, as opposed to joining a particular industry, because then you know that industry inside out. So I think that's best and worst. Next question: how long does it take to go from one rank to another in Accenture? So Accenture we are a very large organization, and we have different departments, if you want to call it. And the time that someone can stay in a particular rank would depend on the department that you're in. So say, take me, for example, I'm in strategy. So going from analyst to consultant is about 2 to 3 years. Consultant to manager is again 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 4 years. And then consultant to senior manager, another 4 years, perhaps. But then if you are in management consulting, sometimes that duration may be shorter. But again, it's not hard and fixed. And I think similarly as what I said about our recruitment process, where we value potential. If there is potential, we are not a tenure based firm. We are not only after 3 years, then only you can be considered for a promotion to move up a rank. If you have shown that you can already perform, say, at a manager level or a senior manager level, then the opportunity is out there for you to take full advantage of. So the next question is, I struggle with confidence. What are some of the ways to overcome nerves? Good question. And I think so. Again, bear in mind that this is a lot easier said than done. And as I'm giving these answers, I'm not saying that I have it all, and I'm not saying that because I'm here saying that there is this way in terms of how you can approach application. It doesn't mean tomorrow if I were to apply to a different management consulting firm, I will 100% get the job. And it doesn't mean that I'm confident with the case study process or anything in general. But I think what helps me personally is that I always take it as a conversation more. Knowing, being sure about what you have to bring on the table is a very good starting point. So as long as you go in knowing that, I mean, you can't be everything to everyone, right? You have to know. So like me, right? I have a psychology background. I'm going into consulting. So what is the value I can bring to the table? And if your firm doesn't see the value in it, then it's not a good firm for you either way. Even if they were to hire you because you marked the checklist, you came from a good university, you have the good grades, and you know what? They need people. They take you in. But if what you have to bring to the table is not being appreciated there, then you wouldn't have a good time and you wouldn't be given the credit you deserve. So I think to your question of struggling with confidence, then again, right? So I always ask the why question. Why are you struggling with confidence? Do you think that you are not good enough for the firm? If you think you're not good enough for the firm, why? Right? Is it because you don't have financial background? Like for me, for example, you don't have financial background. Um, so then, okay, if you don't have that, but surely you must have something else, right? So then what is it you do have? So I think that's the second part. When I mentioned sales, that's the part where you have to sell your value to the firm. And with that, it becomes a negotiation, right? I know you guys are looking for this. I think I'm a fit, even if I'm not the most standard, the cookie cutter fit for consulting, but I have these other things that I have to offer. So take it as a negotiation process and take it as a way for you to see whether or not you're getting the credit that you deserve. So the next one, I often hear about the up or out culture at consulting firms. What's your experience with that so far? So I would say that it's true. It differs across firm, like from firm to firm. Some firms are a bit stricter about it. It's really if you're not performing at the next level by this time, then you're out. And then some firms take a different approach to it, in that it's more about if you are not performing at this level, then by this time, then it affects things like your bonus, things like how much increment you will get, and then I guess that's the more subtle way of then telling you that, okay, look, you're not progressing at this firm, so maybe look out for other opportunities. And I think actually, while it's a bit cutthroat, I think that the up or out culture is a good one in consulting firms, because again, if you are not getting better at your role, then it's a matter of fit, right? And that just means that your potential is not fulfilled in a consulting firm, because again, a consulting firm is not for everyone because of the project nature of it. Some people might love it. Like I really enjoy my job. I really like the project nature of things, because no matter how bad a particular project is, I feel like, okay, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It will end and I can jump into another project next. But some people, they want to learn incrementally, and so because of that, they don't switch as fast when they jump from one project to the other, because they are still thinking about their initial project and they're still having questions like, oh, is it being implemented, did I come up with something that's executable, etc. So again, don't be intimidated by the up or out culture. Just see it also as a way of you getting a sense of whether or not you're fulfilling your potential. So this question here is, oh dear. Oh, okay. Does the cover letter really help out in job application? Do we need cover letter for each application? So I used to ask this question as well because I'm like, oh, I spend so much time writing my cover letter. I don't even know if they read it, because you will have some interviewers who would print it out and then. so so for me, I think it's like lose-lose situation. One, I want people to read it. Two, when they actually read it and print it out and then give it to me and say, you said this particular word here, why? I've also been in the situation where I panic because of that. But I think, yes, it does help out in a job application, either directly or indirectly. So directly in the sense that because it's required and because sometimes your interviewers actually need to print it out, depending on your interviewer style. Some of them want to hold you against the words that you say because that's their way of getting to know you better. But from a more indirect sense as well, I think a cover letter really helps in job application because that's forcing you to do the homework you need to do to find out whether or not you're a fit for the firm, because it's an essay, right? And it's a standard essay format: introduction, three main points, and conclusion. So coming up with a full page of words forces you to understand the industry that you're in. And I think we have this, I think a lot of us have this optimism bias in that because we have heard a bit of information here and there, we think we know enough, but you never know, you will never fully know all that you need to know. So you need to talk to people, you need to do your homework, you need to leverage on platforms like FutureLab. I mean, I think it's super helpful. I mean, if I had it back before I applied, maybe I would be less nervous for some of my interviews, which I think I ended up making a bit of a joke of myself. But it's all yeah, it's all good training, I think. So yeah, so I think it varies from firm to firm. I don't think all firms require a cover letter, but I do think that as internal practice, it's good to always write a cover letter because that structures your thoughts as well. And especially so in management consulting, I think structure is just super important in all that you do, because structure ensures that you don't miss out on anything in the heat of the moment, and it makes sure that you can deliver something in the given time frame, because it's time bounded, right? All projects are time bounded, so you need to make sure that you have checked all your boxes at the end of the project. So a cover letter, it's then a very structured way for you to think through even your own experiences. So when you share your experience as well, an interviewer would really appreciate it because they are familiar with the kind of structure. They would appreciate it if you give your answers in a structured manner. This is my biggest challenge. This is why it was challenging, and this is what I took away from it. You know, step one, step two, step three. So how does employee referral work in Accenture? Very simple. Send your CV to someone who is already working in Accenture. They will pass on your CV to HR on your behalf. And I think if successful, then then I think HR will then contact you directly. So I think employee referral is good, because then you have this point in contact that is not HR that you can check, that can help you follow up with the status of your application. One of the job requirement is leadership. How to convince interviewers if I lack this quality? So this, I think it's a good question, and also a personal one for me, because I don't really see myself as, I mean, I'm not a very natural leader. I don't have this, I don't know, like tiger, like, I don't know, like, I don't even know what you call it, like tiger lady style, where I'm very gung-ho and very ganas about certain things. Like, you must finish this by this and this. I have always practiced, I always believe in leaders who practice what they preach. And I think that is the leadership style that fits me. So I think the point here is that leadership comes in many shapes and forms, and there's not only one type of leader, because that wouldn't work, right? Because there is not only one type of follower. So how can you only have one type of leader? I mean, we're not going to war right here. And even if you were be going to war, you need different types of leader to motivate different types of people. And this is especially important in management consulting because we always have to work in teams. And not all teams work under a leader who is extremely your type A leaders, right? Your type A leaders who gives you a checklist and then gives you a very hard deadline, and if you don't meet it, they don't care about why you didn't meet it. They just cut you out of the team. So those are your, I guess, your very standard type of like more like your harder type of leader. Some people fulfill their potential better if they have a more softer leadership style. But do not be don't think yeah don't feel that just because you don't have you lack leadership simply because you don't have type A leadership style. I mean, and again, easier said than done, because I have been in a position where I'm like, yeah, I have never wanted to be, the one that presented the team's findings, right? I have never wanted to be the head. I always prefer to be the neck that moves the head, right? So I always want to be number two. And even until today, I will tell you the same thing, right? Do I want to be leading a huge team and, being at the forefront, the one presenting all the findings to the client? No, not really. But do I want to be the one behind the scenes, making sure that my boss does? Yeah, I will always prefer to be kingmaker than being the king. And I don't think that that is any lack of leadership at all. It's just a different style. And in terms of convincing your interviewer, I don't think this is a point that I think you should be honest about it. I think you should be honest in terms of what kind of leadership style you have, rather than saying that I think I have very strong leadership because I can manage people so and so, and if they don't do their work, I will adopt so and so approach, especially if that's not the case. So again, think of the interview as a long-term relationship, right? The sentiment aspect of it. It's not just a one-off, I convince you and then I get in and then what? Right? It's like I get in and then I report to you and oh my God, I'm not what I said I was during the interview. So that is also a problem, right? So I think just be honest, and everyone I think has their own unique leadership style, and don't try to fit into a particular type if you're not, because that will always come true. Yeah. Is there a too late age to be a management consultant? No, I don't think so at all. I think it's I think there is any whenever you feel that you're ready for this sort of challenge, or whenever you feel that you're ready for this type of work, I think that is the best time to be a management consultant. And then again, nothing is a career choice, right? It's not permanent. It's a chance for you to gain unique learning opportunities. It's a chance for you to meet new people. So never a too late age. Let's see. When they asked me about leadership in my interview, my response is that I took initiative of asking my classmates to join my team in our projects. I will get their contact information and create a schedule to meet to work on a project. Yeah, so I think that's good, right? So I think that is a very good response to how you can answer questions about leadership. Because again, leadership takes in many shapes and form, right? And you may not be the most natural leader. I'm not the most natural leader, but when there is a particular outcome to be achieved, I am then able to I'm able to dissect the problem, and I'm able to identify what are each team members' unique contributions. So what are they passionate about? What is their capabilities? And then assign work accordingly. That is also being a leader. And then ensuring that people are delivering their individual portions at a fixed time, and then ensuring that all of this gets then submitted in the given timeline that we have, is then being a leader. So I think that's a good example. I mean, that's a very good answer to give. So next question here is then, what if your recommendation as a management consultant does not work out and clients complain? Good question. And I'm still, I face that until today, because, you don't know, you never know if your recommendation is the one that the client wants. So in Essential, we always say, put your client first, right? Because we can give them the best textbook answer based on our experience globally, based on what our subject matter expert says. But then if the client says, no, I do not want to do that, you do not understand my business, you do not understand the people in my organization, your recommendation does not work. So it is the case where there's just no textbook answer. And in that case, it makes it all the riskier, right? Because you can never ensure that you will have the right answer. But I think that's where having a team, and that's why actually we always work in teams, and we always have a hierarchy in all our projects where we will have an MD, a senior manager, to then make sure that we are hearing what the client really wants. And then I think that then reduces the risk of your client complaining. But then again, this is a risk that we can never eliminate completely. Even with the best answers, even with supposed known relationship with the clients, you just wouldn't know. And so I guess this is a good time to then highlight this is the pros and cons of management consulting. So if you're someone who is say I'm from science background, right? So for me it's like A plus B always equals to C, right? Effort always equals to outcome. But then when you get into management consulting, you can put in so much effort and get absolutely nothing out of it. And that happens, right? Because you are dealing with a client, you are dealing with other people, and you are dealing with recommendations that are subjective. So let's see. Did I miss out anything? Oh wait, there's one more here. Last question. How to score an internship position at Accenture? Send your CV in. Send your CV in and send your CV in. Put your best foot forward. Know what role you are going to perform. Speak to people. Speak to people to make sure that you are sufficiently prepped, and yeah, go for the interview. And then I guess related to that, then how to score a full-time position at Accenture. I think I just want to highlight that, don't see it as scoring a position, because then that makes it feel like, you have to fit in a certain type. Again, it almost makes it sound like you need to be a certain kind of person to be in Accenture. I think you need to be your person, and you need to find a firm that would give you the credit that you deserve and that would allow you to fulfill your potential. But in terms of, how do you get into Accenture? I mean, or how do you get an interview? And that's just a very standard process, right? Send in your CV, prepare your cover letter, yeah, know the role you're applying for, and bear in mind that, of course, timing matters sometimes. Like it depends on projects, it depends on um, it depends on project, it depends on fit. So I think like one of the earlier question is that we are hiring for strategy energy consultants, because that is an area that is growing very quickly in this area in Southeast Asia. So that's something that we are looking out for. So yeah, so just bear in mind timing, and because being a consultant, again, it's not a BAU role, therefore it depends on whether or not we have clients in that particular industry. Okay, so any final questions before we wrap up? If not, I think thank you guys for uh, I don't even know what you call this. Thank you guys for logging on, I guess. And yeah, do check out FutureLab. I mean, I think the key point that I said, I hope not too many times, is that you need to know the job that you're applying for, and you need to see it as an opportunity for you. And you just need to see it as a two-way relationship, and it's not about you trying to fit a particular type. So do speak to people who are already in the organization. That always helps, and I think FutureLab does offer that. So yeah. Okay. Thank you.